You married a broke fool. Evan said it like he was announcing a winner, fork still buried in the roast, shoulders loose, eyes fixed on Tiffany. She didn't correct him. She didn't even glance my way. She laughed, light, champagne bright, the kind of laugh that fills a room and empties something inside you at the same time. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from. Palm Beach, April 11th, 2021, Sunday, 7:26 p.m. The ceiling fans traced lazy circles. Low Coltrane jazz slipped from the Sonos. The Florida heat pressed against the windows even with the AC working hard. That laugh burned deeper than any betrayal I'd known. I'd built my fortune quietly. $60 million hidden behind trusts, LLCs, and airtight clauses. My legacy wasn't loud, it was buried in paper. I watched the condensation ring from Evan's glass fade into the oak table, a ghostly circle that would outlast dessert. And in that moment I knew the charade was over. Evan leaned back, satisfied. 19 years old, freshly home from college with a chain around his neck he couldn't afford without my card. He wore my patience like a borrowed jacket. Stretched, unappreciated. Grief had turned him sharp-edged after his mom died. He didn't punch, he jabbed. Evan, I said, evenly, eat your carrots. He chuckled, speared one, and stared at Tiffany again. He wanted her to see him as the truth-teller, not the son. Marshall, Tiffany said softly. He sets just joking. I looked at her. Pale blue sundress, gold chain catching the kitchen light. A new perfume she'd bought the week before, April 3, receipt folded under the box in the pantry, $84.19. She was beautiful in the way people get when they're finally living above counting groceries. She gave Evan a look then. Just for a second, not mocking, not cold. Conflicted, her smile wavered like a candle in wind. I saw it. She saw that I saw it. And then it was gone, buried under another practiced laugh. Then where sips all this supposed money? Evan said, gesturing around the bungalow. All I see is a beat-up Land Cruiser and a Publix rewards card. He wasn't wrong about the seats. Cracked leather, driver's side worn thin. I liked it that way, no signals, no pretension. The house was small by Palm Beach standards. 3 bedrooms, red barrel tile roof, hibiscus hedge. Sanctuary, not a showroom. I didn't defend myself with numbers. I never do. I build my defenses in silence. Trust deeds, prenups, recorded filings. Whitaker Family Trust 2019, amended 2021. Ocean Boulevard LLC. Prenuptial agreement signed March 10, 2021. A blue binder locked inside a steel safe under a Persian rug bought in Boca in 2007 for $3,600. My late wife's handwriting on the first trust draft. Protect what we built. You know what I think? Evan said, fork tapping the plate. I think Tiffany Set's starting to figure it out. She didn't stop him. She didn't even flinch. I cleared my throat. Let Sets clear the table. She stood, gathering plates automatically, moving through the kitchen like someone who's learned the layout, not claimed it. Her bracelet slid to her wrist bone. Evan stayed put, king of crumbs and fading lilies. Tell me, he pressed. Why are we here? Why is Anara Tiffany wearing Cartier? Why am I paying for textbooks with my card? You stir a joke, Dad. I stacked forks, watched steam rise from the sink as hot water hit ceramic. Tiffany dried plates beside me. Quiet. Through the window the bougainvillea glowed pink against the dark. She finally said, almost too lightly, you make things hard, Marshall. I turned, do I? For a heartbeat, her eyes faltered again. The same flicker of doubt I'd caught earlier. She wasn't fully his side yet, but she wasn't on mine either. That hurt more than Evan's words. Evan stomped to the fridge, grabbed the key lime pie, dropped it on the counter with a dull thud. 7:49 p.m. blinked on the microwave clock from the last power outage. I'd never reset it. We ate dessert in brittle politeness. The pie was tart. Everyone pretended it wasn't. Evan disappeared into his room, door almost slamming. Tiffany lingered, folding the napkin into smaller and smaller squares, as if crumbs were easier to fix than cracks. I'm going to shower, she said, leaving her lipstick-marked glass by the sink. When the house quieted, I picked up that glass and held it to the light. A perfect half-moon of lipstick. Evidence, not of guilt yet, but of the moment everything tilted. I took out my pocket notebook. April 11th, 2021. Evan laughed. Tiffany laughed with him. Underlined laughed twice. Folded the page. Slipped it under the blue binder in the safe. The steel was cold under my palm as I shut it. Some nights don't explode, they etch. This was one of them. Lying in bed, the ceiling fan spun slow circles. I heard Evan's YouTube chatter through the wall. Tiffany's shower had ended long ago. The house settled, and in that stillness I understood betrayal rarely starts with a lie. It starts with a laugh. That laugh was the first crack in the shell. Grief has a way of sneaking back into rooms you thought you'd sealed. For me, it arrived between empty wine glasses and Tiffany's whispered phone calls, like tidewater creeping under a door. The laugh at that Sunday dinner didn't fade. It echoed over the next few weeks. It started attaching itself to things, small things. Receipts left on the counter, late-night lights under her door, my own heartbeat at 2 a.m. when sleep refused to visit. Tiffany began hosting little gatherings. That's what she called them. Nothing fancy, Marshall, just a few friends. Except the receipts told a different story. April 23rd, 2021. $2,870 catering bill from Palm Grove Events. I found it one morning tucked under the fruit bowl. There was a lipstick smudge next to the signature line. When I asked her casually, she kissed me on the cheek and said, "You can afford it." She wasn't set wrong, but that wasn't set the point. These weren't just parties. They were probes, little tests to see how far the boundaries stretched. One night, around 1:30 a.m., I was in my study reading through old trust amendments when I heard a whisper through the air vent. Evan's voice. "She sit will leave when she finds out he sips broke. Trust me." The words slithered down like smoke. I froze, pen halfway across the page. He was on the phone, probably in the guest room again. My own son casually predicting the collapse of my marriage like he was talking about a football game. I slid open my desk drawer and pulled out the folder I kept tucked beneath the legal pads. Trust papers, deeds, my wife's photo. Her handwriting on the back, protect what we built. She'd written it in 2015, 2 weeks before her surgery. I'd found it years later when reorganizing files, and I'd kept it near me ever since. I stared at her handwriting until the whispering stopped. The insomnia returned with a vengeance. Night after night, I found myself pacing the hallways at absurd hours. The house smelled different at night. Cleaner, emptier. On May 9th, a Sunday, I wandered into the kitchen at 2:13 a.m. and opened the study drawer again. I laid everything on the counter. Trust deeds, prenup copies, property maps, Ocean Boulevard LLC certificates. My late wife's photo sat among them like a quiet witness. It hit me then I wasn't just protecting money. I was protecting the years it took to earn it. Every long night at the firm. Every delayed vacation. Every time I said next year and meant it. 2 nights later, I caught Tiffany whispering to her brother Zach on the back patio. It wasn't set scheming. It was fear. "I can't go back to counting groceries," she said, voice cracking. Zach murmured something I couldn't catch, but I heard her inhale sharply like someone remembering a cold winter. For a moment that softened me, almost. I stood in the dark hallway, barefoot, the marble cool under my feet. She wasn't born into money, she'd clawed her way to comfort. I understood that fear. I'd lived on ramen and black coffee once too. But fear can turn into ambition, and ambition mixed with Evan's resentment was a dangerous blend. By late May, the little parties grew, caterers came more often. Tiffany started dressing differently, not glamorous, just strategic. Softer fabrics, polished jewelry, subtle but deliberate. Evan, meanwhile, grew bolder. He stopped hiding his contempt behind jokes. "Dad, maybe if you actually made something of yourself, we wouldn't be living like this." This was a Spanish tile bungalow 10 minutes from Worth Avenue, with a well-kept yard and paid-off mortgage. He had no idea what real broke looked like. June 3rd, 2021. I found a bank envelope on the hall table addressed to Tel Whitaker. Inside was a credit application for a luxury car lease. Not submitted yet, just filled out in pen. She'd listed her income as $480,000 annually. She didn't net make that. I placed the envelope back exactly where I found it, then went to my study and pulled out my black moleskin notebook. June 3rd. Credit application, $480 CAD income. Not submitted, underlined not submitted. I was watching her assemble a narrative. Mid-June, the house started feeling like a stage set. Lights on at odd hours. Whispered phone calls. Documents left where they shouldn't be. And me moving through it like a ghost with a pen, recording everything. On June 19th, at 11:47 p.m., I caught Evan again, this time in the kitchen. He was leaning against the counter, phone pressed to his ear, grinning. Yeah, she sits serious. Trust me, she sits not staying with a broke guy forever. She wants security. She deserves it. His words sliced clean. I stepped into the light. Security? He jumped. Dad, who were you talking to? No one. Just. He waved the phone, college friend. I held his gaze until the silence became a wall. Go to bed, Evan. He stormed off, muttering something under his breath. When the house fell quiet again, I opened the sliding door and stepped into the humid night. The palms swayed. Somewhere far off, a fountain trickled. I realized I was no longer just suspicious. I was preparing. The betrayal wasn't theoretical anymore. It was progressing. Every receipt Tiffany left out, every credit form, every whispered call, it was all evidence, not for a fight, for a case. I closed the door, locked it, and whispered to the empty house, protect what we built. They didn't know it yet, but every sleepless night was another brick in the wall I was building. Palm Beach sunlight has a way of revealing what night tries to hide. By September 2021, the masks were slipping. Not because of some dramatic outburst, but because shadows cast by greed grow longer in daylight. September 8th, a Wednesday, I met Marianne at the Breakers Hotel. If you've ever been there, you know the kind of wealth that breathes, polished marble floors, towering arches, fountains that sound like whispers. We sat in the corner of the courtyard cafe beneath a striped umbrella, the Atlantic breeze curling through the columns. Marianne has been my lawyer for 15 years. Sharp, unflappable, the kind of woman who could read a trust document once and find the loose thread you didn't know existed. She sipped her espresso, leaned forward, and said, she signed the prenup. The trust is airtight. If they think you're broke, let them prove it. Her words were calm, surgical. I stirred my coffee slowly. You search saying I should what? Sit back? I sep saying, she replied, lowering her voice. Observation is sometimes louder than confrontation. If Tiffany and Evan are conspiring, they sup get sloppy. Let them think you stir a man too tired to fight. It sep's the best camouflage you have. She was right. Confrontation would only tip my hand. So I began to observe quietly, methodically. Back home, I enlisted someone unexpected, Dora. My housekeeper, she'd been with me for 9 years before Tiffany, before the grief thickened the air. Dora has this way of noticing things without being noticed. When I explained what I needed, a simple visitor log, notarized entries, nothing more, she didn't flinch. She simply nodded, tucked the notary stamp into her apron, and said, "We'll keep it clean, Mr. Whitaker." By mid-October, Zach's black BMW started appearing at odd hours. First, once every couple of weeks. Then, like clockwork, 3 nights a week. Dora logged every arrival meticulously. October 6th, 1418. License plate numbers. Times, duration, signed, stamped. On October 22nd, I came home late from a client meeting. The house was dark, except for the faint glow from the kitchen. Tiffany was on the phone, barefoot, pacing. "Yes, I know," she whispered. "Just trust me. He sips distracted. He doesn't suspect anything." I stayed in the shadows of the hallway. She didn't see me. Her voice trembled, but not with fear, excitement. The next morning, a letter arrived in the mail. It was from the Palm Beach County Tax Collector's Office. Property taxes for Ocean Boulevard, LLC. She left it unopened on the counter. but I saw her eyes catch the bold print. Estimated market value $14,700,000. Her pupils dilated like she'd just hit a slot machine jackpot. She didn't know Ocean Boulevard LLC was mine. I'd set it up in 2019 to hold one of the properties quietly, the mansion Tiffany hadn't seen yet. My late wife and I had agreed to keep it out of the public eye until Evan was older. That house was the cornerstone of our legacy. Later that night, I watched Tiffany fold that letter and slip it into her bedside drawer like a secret. Meanwhile, Evan was playing his own games. On October 29th, Dora caught him at the side gate talking to one of the old landscapers, an older man named Julio who'd worked for us years back before the renovation ended. He was charming, Dora told me later, handing me the signed log. Asked Julio about some vendor codes. Said it was for deliveries. I knew exactly what he was doing. Julio, bless him, still remembered the outdated vendor gate code, one that hadn't been used since 2018. Evan Sweet talked him right into handing it over. That was their first mistake. Because in my world, old codes don't disappear. They get monitored. On November 2nd, I called Patel, my financial advisor from my study. Flag any irregular attempts on Ocean Boulevard LLC. I instructed him title monitoring, lien notifications, the works, and do it quietly. He didn't ask why. He just said, understood. I spent the following weeks living two lives. To Tiffany and Evan, I was the tired father-husband, distracted, maybe slipping. To myself, I was a quiet archivist. Every document, every log, every piece of mail became a puzzle piece. I started noticing patterns. Tiffany's late-night calls often came on Tuesdays and Thursdays, the same nights Zach's BMW appeared. Evan's sudden interest in old household vendors wasn't random. He'd grown up around the logistics of wealth. He knew access was often worth more than signatures. On November 17th, Dora found a folded printout near the guest bathroom trash bin, a Zillow page. The Ocean Boulevard property. Someone had printed it at 2:14 a.m. The timestamp was at the bottom. Estimated value, $59.8 million. The printer was in my study. Tiffany didn't know I could check the print log. Evan didn't know I'd installed a separate password years ago. The only person who could have printed it was someone who had borrowed my office key after hours. I didn't confront anyone. I simply added it to the growing stack of evidence in my safe. November 17th. Zillow printout, 2:14 a.m. That house was supposed to be my retirement. My legacy, the quiet promise to my wife that Evan would inherit something untainted. And here it was, reduced to a PDF printout someone left next to a trash bin. By late November, I'd stopped underestimating them. I spent Thanksgiving quietly. Tiffany made a show of carving the turkey. Evan gave a toast about new beginnings that sounded more like a veiled taunt. Zach arrived late, all smiles, his BMW purring in the driveway like a predator that had scented blood. I watched them all and said very little. They thought they were moving in shadows. But in Palm Beach, even shadows leave footprints. Betrayal doesn't always arrive like a storm. Sometimes it unfolds like architectural plans, carefully drawn, page by page, until you realize the house they're building isn't yours anymore. January 6, 2022. Palm Beach mornings have that crisp coolness that lasts about 40 minutes before the humidity takes over. I drove to Patel's office on Royal Palm Way just after 9 a.m. The street was lined with bougainvillea and Bentleys, both equally well groomed. Patel greeted me with his usual understated warmth. He's been my financial advisor for 20 years, discreet, brilliant with structures, allergic to drama. He closed the glass door to his conference room, opened a leather portfolio, and slid a statement toward me. Trust holdings as of December 31st, he said. I scanned the figures. $60 million. Exactly where it should be. Multiple LLCs, layered trusts, staggered ownership stakes. Bulletproof. This, Patel said, tapping the page, is fortress-level planning. Even if someone tried, they couldn't touch it without a court order and a miracle. I nodded, but inside I was already picturing Tiffany and Evan poking around with vendor codes and Zillow printouts, mistaking shadows for doors. Before leaving, I instructed Patel to keep all alerts on Ocean Boulevard LLC immediate. Any lien attempts, title searches, ownership queries, I wanted to know within the hour. January 19th. Marianne filed several sealed motions quietly, moving like a chess player setting up a checkmate 10 turns away. One was a motion to confirm the validity of the prenup in anticipation of potential challenge. Another was to preemptively register protective notices on key trust assets. It was all quiet, precise, and invisible to anyone not looking at court dockets daily. February blurred by in a slow, watchful rhythm. Tiffany and Evan didn't realize I'd shifted from passive observation to active fortification. March 4th, 2022. Friday night. I installed new security cameras around the house. Video only. Florida law is strict about audio surveillance without consent, and I wasn't going to give anyone ammunition to cry foul. The cameras were small, nearly invisible, mounted under eaves and above door frames. They weren't for catching strangers. They were for documenting familiar faces. On March 11th, Tiffany hosted another one of her small get-togethers. I watched the footage later that night from my study. She wore silk pajamas, light gray, expensive. Around 11:26 p.m., Zach arrived. She opened the door slowly, glancing over her shoulder before letting him in. The camera caught Zach stepping inside, lowering his voice. "Once the transfer's done, Evan's on our side," he whispered. Tiffany nodded, biting her lip. She didn't look conflicted anymore. She looked ready. I paused the footage and replayed that line twice. Transfer, Evan, their side. March 14th, 2022. I met Marianne again at her office downtown. She'd already reviewed the footage I'd forwarded through encrypted channels. "They said you're laying groundwork," she said. "If they think you sit you're broke, their plan is probably to maneuver assets away from your control, claim some kind of beneficial interest or pressure you into liquidation." "They set her sloppy," I muttered. "They suffer ambitious," she corrected. "And ambition with partial information is dangerous." We decided then I'd let the blueprint keep unfolding. As long as everything was documented, Dora's notarized logs, Patel's financial oversight video footage, we were assembling a portfolio of betrayal more airtight than any accusation. March 22nd. I discovered their second mistake. Dora noticed Tiffany lingering around the study door during cleaning hours. She wasn't subtle. Dora found the office key left slightly out of place one afternoon, a half-inch rotated, something only someone meticulous would catch. She logged it, stamped it, and told me that evening. I checked the study immediately. Nothing missing, but the safe had faint fingerprints near the dial. Not mine, not Dora's. Tiffany was trying to figure out what I kept behind steel and rugs. March 25th. A courier delivered a thin envelope addressed to Tiffany. I wasn't snooping, the envelope was translucent under sunlight. I could see Palm Realty Group letterhead faintly through the paper. She tucked it into her purse quickly, but not before I noted the sender. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I checked the new camera feed from the entryway. 11:43 p.m. Tiffany emerged from the bedroom, robe tied, phone pressed to her ear. "Yes," she whispered. "Once we get clarity on the property, Zach says we can start formal steps." Clarity on the property. Palm Realty. Late night calls. They were drawing blueprints, not with rulers and pencils, but with whispers, vendor codes, and half-truths. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the study under the warm glow of the banker Sips's lamp, flipping through trust documents, prenup clauses, and video stills. I made a new section in my black notebook. Blueprint evidence. March 11th. Zach entry footage transfer quote. March 22nd. Study key moved. March 25th. Palm Realty envelope plus late call. I wrote the words slowly, deliberately. They think they're building a future. They're leaving fingerprints. By early April, even Evan's behavior shifted. He stopped pretending to like dinner conversations. Instead, he'd appear briefly, hover like a spectator, then retreat. When he did speak, it was loaded. "Some people don't know when to let go," he muttered one evening as I walked past him in the hallway. I didn't reply. His words weren't aimed at me. They were rehearsals for something bigger. April 7th, Patel called. FYI, he said, there Sebin's been a preliminary inquiry on Ocean Boulevard LLC Sebin's title record. Nothing official filed yet, but someone ran a search through a real estate data aggregator, likely a broker or a lawyer fishing. Palm Realty? I asked. Exactly, he said. I thanked him and hung up. The trap wasn't closing yet, but the blueprint was nearly complete. I understood then they were preparing for a move, assuming I was distracted and cornered. But they'd underestimated two things, my patience and my paper trail. They thought they were designing a new life. They didn't realize they were etching their betrayal in ink. Some games don't start with a scoreboard. They start with a question that changes everything. June 3rd, 2022. The air in Palm Beach had turned thick and lazy like honey left in the sun. Summer always brought that mix of heat and tension. You could feel it even before the storms rolled in. Evan cornered me in the kitchen that afternoon. He'd just returned from a weekend trip with friends in Miami, all tan lines and new sneakers. His hair was pushed back carelessly, his chain glinting against his t-shirt. He leaned against the counter, arms crossed. When you stir gone, he asked. The house is mine, right? It wasn't a casual question. His eyes didn't blink when he said it. I set down my coffee mug slowly. Earn it, I said. His smirk faltered, just enough to reveal the boy beneath the bravado. What's that supposed to mean? It means, I replied, inheritance isn't set a prize. It sets a responsibility. You don't just get a house because you happen to share my last name. He scoffed. Yeah, right? You act like I haven't been through enough. Mom Sip's gone, you married Tiffany, and now you want to lecture me about responsibility? The words hit like pebbles. Not heavy, but relentless. He stormed out, muttering, You're pathetic under his breath. That night, just before midnight, we crossed paths again. I'd gone downstairs for water. He was sitting at the kitchen island, scrolling through his phone, lit by the cold blue glow of the screen. You think I don't see what you're doing? He said suddenly. I stopped. And what sep's that? You stir testing me. You always have. You keep your secrets locked up like some paranoid old man, and you expect me to be grateful for crumbs. His voice cracked, just slightly. Grief still lived there, buried under resentment. I pulled out a chair and sat across from him. Evan, I always wanted you to succeed, but you spent the last year trying to prove I Bohm the villain in your story. You chosen sides without even asking what game you proud playing. He looked away, jaw tight. You picked her over us. No, I said quietly. I picked boundaries. For a heartbeat, he almost softened. But anger won. It usually does when people think betrayal is power. Meanwhile, Tiffany and Zach's moves had grown bolder. June 12th. Dora found a forged invoice in the recycling bin. $14,200 dated June 9th for landscaping renovation services at Ocean Boulevard. The contractor's signature was fake. I'd met the man years ago. She brought me the crumpled invoice in a Ziploc bag like evidence from a crime scene. June 14th. Zach emailed Tiffany an investment proposal vid3. I didn't intercept it illegally. It was printed accidentally on the shared home printer. The first page was stuck behind a grocery list. The proposal outlined a fictional investment pool, supposedly tied to real estate flips, with an initial capital injection of $2.5 million. Tiffany Sepp's notes in the margin read, Do steak? Marianne and I met on June 18th to go over everything. She flipped through the forged invoice, the investment proposal, Dora's logs, Patel's lean alerts, and the camera footage. They supper escalating, she said. And they supper sloppy. This proposal alone screams fraud. I seen cleaner scams on late-night infomercials. Court? I asked. She nodded slowly. We file a fraud notice first, then we get a date. Yusuf got enough evidence to build a wall around the trust. They once even see it coming. June 27th. Marianne quietly filed the fraud notice. It went through without fanfare. Just a line on a docket, invisible to Tiffany and Zach, but critical to everything that came next. The court date came faster than I expected. June 5th, 2023, a year out. Tiffany assumed it was estate housekeeping. She even labeled one of her dress boxes in the closet with a sticky note. For court day. I remember seeing that note on July 2nd while retrieving an old watch box from the top shelf. Her handwriting was neat, loops controlled like she was planning a vacation. She had no idea she was labeling the day her plans would collapse. Meanwhile, Evan continued to drift toward their orbit. He spent more time with Zach, sometimes disappearing for weekends without explanation. I didn't need to follow him. Every conversation he had with Tiffany was sharper, shorter, more transactional. August 10th, 2022. Tiffany found me in the study late at night. She leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "Why do you keep everything locked away?" she asked. "Because some things are worth protecting," I said. She gave me a look, half frustration, half calculation. "Or maybe because you said you're afraid someone else might deserve them more." "That's not how legacy works," I replied. She stepped into the room, looked at the safe under the rug, then back at me. "You'll see," she whispered. Then she walked away. That whisper stayed with me. By September, my patience had sharpened into strategy. Evan thought he was playing an inheritance game. Tiffany and Zach thought they were drawing a perfect heist blueprint. But I'd spent 2 years preparing for storms, and storms have a way of washing away bad plans. They thought inheritance was a shortcut. They forgot it's also a test. Some storms announce themselves with thunder. Others arrive quietly, creeping in under the door until you realize the floor's already wet. Spring 2023 was exactly that kind of storm. By March, Palm Beach had shaken off the winter chill. Bougainvillea were blooming, tourists were back, and the air carried that mix of sunscreen, salt, and expensive cologne. But inside the house, tension had settled in like humidity, inescapable, heavy, constant. March 22nd, 2023. A Wednesday, at 3:17 p.m. My phone buzzed with a security alert while I was at Patel's office reviewing quarterly trust statements. The entry gate camera had picked up Tiffany's car. Normally, that wouldn't bother me. She often came and went, but this time the footage showed her driving in with someone new. A realtor. I watched the feed remotely as they drove past the house and toward the back entrance that connected to the vendor gate. Tiffany had been clever enough to use the old vendor code Evan had gotten from Julio. She thought it was invisible. She was wrong. The video feed switched angles. Tiffany led the realtor through the rear garden like she owned the place. They paused by the pergola, pointing toward the south lawn. The realtor gestured wide, like someone giving a tour to potential buyers. My thumb hovered over the speak button on the security app. I could have confronted her right then, demanded an explanation. Instead, I watched in silence. 2 hours later, Dora confirmed what I said seen. She was showing him around like she was selling the house, she said. Didn't sit even check if anyone was home. March 25th. I got another notification, this time from Patel's office. A lien monitoring alert had flagged a preliminary title search on Ocean Boulevard LLC. Someone, somewhere, was poking at the foundation. Patel called me directly. "It's SIP's not a bank," he said. "Private entity, probably someone SIP's lawyer testing the waters. You want to shut it down?" "No," I replied. "Let them think they SIP are ahead." Every step they took was another footprint in wet cement. April was unusually rainy that year. The house felt smaller, tighter, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Tiffany grew more openly distant. Evan rarely came home, and when he did, he spoke to me like I was already a ghost. April 19th, Dora found Zach in the driveway late at night. He claimed he was dropping off documents. She logged the visit, 11:32 p.m. black BMW, rainy night. 15 minutes. She also noted Tiffany meeting him at the door in a silk robe, whispering before they both disappeared into the kitchen. I reviewed the camera footage later. Tiffany handed Zach a folder. He slid something inside his jacket. They were accelerating their timeline. By early May, even Evan's bravado had begun to crack under the weight of the coming court date. One night, May 6th, he showed up in the kitchen after midnight, barefoot, pacing like a kid caught between two bad dreams. "You think this is going to end well for you?" he asked suddenly. I turned off the faucet, dried my hands slowly. "For me, yes. For you?" That sip's still up to you. He laughed bitterly. She sips not who you think she is, Dad. She sips smarter. She sips planning. I tilted my head. And you stir helping her? He didn't just answer. That silence said everything. May 14th, Patel called again. The same entity that did the title search just filed a preliminary lien notice, he said. They scepter testing defenses. I already flagged it, but this is coordinated. They semper getting desperate, I murmured. Or confident, Patel countered. Either way, the waterline was rising. June arrived hot and restless. The court date was set for June 15th. Tiffany thought it was a simple estate hearing. Some paperwork formality. She'd picked out a cream-colored dress for the occasion. Elegant, understated, designed for optics. I'd seen the box labeled for court day months earlier. She was preparing for a coronation. June 13th, 2 nights before court. Tiffany opened a bottle of Veuve Clicquot at dinner. The sound of the cork echoed like a starter pistol. She raised her glass. To new beginnings, she said. Zack was there, of course. Evan, too, though quieter than usual. For a brief second, his eyes met mine across the table. There was hesitation there, a flicker of the boy I'd raised, not the young man I barely recognized. But then Zack clinked his glass against Tiffany Sepp's and said, "To what Epps ours?" The moment passed. I didn't toast. I didn't smile. I just watched. Later that night, rain hammered the roof. Palm fronds thrashed outside like restless ghosts. I stood by the study window, watching lightning flash across the sky, illuminating the pool deck in harsh white light. Everything was in place. Dora's logs, Patel's alerts, Marianne's filings, video evidence, the fraudulent invoice, the investment proposal V3, the court calendar. They thought the tide was turning in their favor. They hadn't seen the undertow I'd been building beneath their feet for 2 years. They thought the tide was theirs. They hadn't seen the undertow. June 15th, 2023, the day everything turned. Palm Beach County Courthouse sits on the corner of Dixie Highway and Banyan Boulevard, all pale stone and glass. It's not an imposing building, but that morning it felt like the stage I'd been quietly building for 2 years. I arrived at 8:42 a.m. sharp, gray suit pressed, navy tie knotted perfectly, documents organized in my leather briefcase. Marianne met me by the security line. She wore a tailored black suit and carried a single slim folder, the legal equivalent of a sharpened blade. "You ready?" she asked. I exhaled slowly. More than they are. Tiffany arrived 15 minutes later. Cream dress, hair immaculate. She walked through those glass doors like she was stepping onto a red carpet. Zack trailed behind her, wearing a navy blazer too tight across the shoulders. Evan followed a few paces back, eyes downcast, wearing the same chain he'd worn the night he asked about the house. She smiled when she saw me. Not kindly, politely, the kind of smile people give when they think they've already won. 9 a.m. courtroom 4B. The judge was an older man with reading glasses perched low on his nose. He'd seen every kind of family implosion imaginable. To him, this was another Thursday. To me, it was everything. As we sat down, Tiffany leaned toward Zack and whispered something. He smirked. Evan looked at them both, and then away. Her attorney, a man named Carl Benson, stood first. He was the kind of lawyer who thought volume could substitute for preparation. His suit was expensive, but his arguments were going to be cheap. "Your Honor," he began, "this is a straightforward matter. My client has been misled regarding the financial assets of her husband, Mr. Whitaker. She entered into this marriage under the assumption that she was marrying into a stable financial situation. Instead, she found herself in a position of uncertainty and deception." Marianne didn't even look ruffled. She waited, pen poised, like a hawk watching a rabbit talk itself into a trap. Carl continued, "We are requesting that the court consider the equitable distribution of marital assets, particularly regarding Ocean Boulevard LLC, an entity that has been deliberately obscured from my client." My heartbeat slowed. This was the moment they'd spent months preparing for. They thought Ocean Boulevard LLC was a lever. They didn't realize it was a wall, Marianne stood. Her presence changed the air in the room. Your Honor, she said evenly, this is not a case of obscured assets. This is a case of individuals, Mrs. Whitaker, her brother Zach, and regrettably Mr. Whitaker's son Evan, conspiring to unlawfully interfere with a legally protected trust structure. We will demonstrate through notarized logs, financial alerts, surveillance footage, and documented fraud attempts that the petitioner's claims are not only baseless but malicious. Carl tried to interject. She didn't even glance at him. Let's begin, the judge said, adjusting his glasses. Exhibit after exhibit came out like precision artillery. First, the prenup, signed March 10th, 2021. Marianne laid it flat on the table like a trump card. Second, Dora's notarized visitor logs, each page stamped, dated, signed, Zach's BMW entries in October. Late-night visits, unscheduled realtor meetings. Third, Patel's lien alerts and financial oversight records. The preliminary title search, the private lien notice. Fourth, the forged $14,200 landscaping invoice. The investment proposal vid 3, with Tiffany's handwritten notes. Fifth, surveillance footage from March 11th, 2022, Tiffany opening the door in silk pajamas. Zach whispering, once the transfer SEP's done, Evan SEP's on our side. Sixth, the Zillow printout timestamp 2:14 a.m. November 17th, 2021. Seventh, the audio logs of my calls with Patel and Marianne confirming legal protections and fraud notices. And finally, the trust structure itself. Marianne had prepared a clean flowchart, Whitaker Family Trust, at the top. Multiple LLCs beneath, Ocean Boulevard LLC secured through layered ownership and prenup protection. Every exhibit was dated, signed, stamped, sequential. Carl's confidence deflated with each piece of evidence. His objections grew weaker. Tiffany's smile faded slowly, like a painting left in the sun too long. Zach shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Evan kept his eyes on the floor. When Marianne finished, the judge leaned back and took off his glasses. He rubbed his temples for a moment, then said, I've seen some messy cases, but this is organized. Carl sputtered, Your Honor, surely. The judge held up a hand. Mr. Benson, unless you have a legal argument that refutes signed documents, surveillance footage, and notarized logs, I suggest you sit down. The courtroom was silent, except for the sound of Tiffany's bracelet sliding down her wrist as she crossed her arms. The ruling didn't take long. Declaratory judgment in my favor. Permanent injunction, preventing Tiffany, Zach, or Evan from interfering with trust assets. Lis pendens dissolved. Lien attempts nullified. Their claims dismissed with prejudice. Attorneys' fees awarded they would pay for every hour Marianne billed. The gavel came down like thunder. The room exhaled. So did I. Tiffany sat there, staring at the judge like the world had tilted under her. Zach muttered something under his breath. Carl packed his papers with the deflated air of a man who'd bet on the wrong horse. Evan. He looked at me. For the first time in years, really looked at me. There was no smirk, no resentment. Just the hollow recognition that he'd stood on the wrong side when the tide turned. As we filed out, Tiffany tried to catch my eye. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Her silence was the sound of everything she'd built collapsing at once. Outside, the sky was a brutal Florida blue. Heat shimmered off the pavement. Marianne stood beside me, arms crossed, looking satisfied. Well, she said, that was poetic. I smiled for the first time in months. They thought they were architects, I said. Turns out they were squatters. She laughed softly. Justice has a funny way of landing. The wind picked up, carrying the courthouse fountain's spray toward us. For a brief moment, the world felt clean again. The room exhaled. So did I. Victory doesn't always sound like cheers. Sometimes it sounds like silence echoing through empty hallways. June 20th, 2023. 5 days after the verdict, Tiffany left. Not with a dramatic outburst or a screaming match, but quietly like someone slipping out of a hotel room at dawn, pretending they were never there. I came downstairs at 6:45 a.m. The sun had just started pushing through the blinds, casting long slants of gold across the marble floor. Dora stood by the front door, holding a clipboard. Two movers were loading Tiffany's suitcases into a black SUV. She asked for an early pickup. Dora said softly. Tiffany appeared a moment later, wearing oversized sunglasses and a beige linen dress. She looked like a woman on her way to a weekend in the Hamptons, not someone walking away from a failed coup. She didn't say a word. Not to me. Not to Dora. She just handed a manila envelope to one of the movers and pointed toward the study. I followed them in. The envelope was addressed to me. Inside a single page, a typed note. Marshall, I guess you were never the fool after all. T. No apologies. No explanations. Just a line that managed to be both bitter and grudgingly respectful. By 8:10 a.m., the SUV pulled out of the driveway. Dora closed the door slowly, as if trying not to disturb the quiet that had settled over the house. Do you want me to rekey the locks today? She asked. Yes, I said. All of them. That afternoon, the locksmith arrived. By 3 p.m., every keyhole in the mansion had a new shape. Every code was rotated. Every access point reset. I watched the locksmith's van leave through the main gate, the newly programmed keypad beeping softly as it closed. Zach didn't get such a gentle exit. On June 28th, I received a call from Mary Ann. The fraud investigation SUP's moving forward, she said. Zach SUP's facing potential charges for the forged invoice and the investment proposal. His lawyer SUP's already reaching out for a settlement discussion. I wasn't surprised. He'd always played with fire. He just didn't expect to get burned. Evan was different. On July 5th, he showed up unannounced. No entourage, no bravado. Just my son, standing at the front door wearing a wrinkled t-shirt and looking like a boy who'd lost his map. Can we talk? He asked. We sat in the den, the air conditioning humming softly in the background. The house felt cavernous without Tiffany's parties, without Zach's late-night intrusions. Evan stared at his hands for a long time before he spoke. I messed up, he said finally. I didn't interrupt. I thought she cared about us. About me, he continued. But it was always about the money. I was too angry to see it. I wanted to hurt you, and she gave me a way to do it. His voice cracked on that last sentence. For the first time in a long time, I saw my son, not the bitter young man Tiffany had molded, but the boy who used to race me down the beach at sunrise. I can fix what happened, he said, but I want to do better. I leaned back, exhaling slowly. Doing better starts with honesty and responsibility. He nodded. I shall do whatever it takes. Marianne had suggested something similar. Put structure around his future, she said. He's not beyond saving. He just needs guardrails. So that's what we did. July 18th, Evan signed a trust addendum that outlined strict conditions, financial counseling, quarterly check-ins, and controlled stipends tied to employment milestones. It wasn't a punishment. It was a lifeline. He agreed without argument. As the weeks passed, the house transformed. I rekeyed every lock. The security system got a full overhaul. Tiffany's clothes were shipped to a forwarding address in New York, cash on delivery. The staff stopped whispering. The air felt lighter. One night in early August, I walked through the mansion alone. The hallways that had once echoed with forced laughter and whispered schemes now held only silence. I paused in the main foyer, looking up at the chandelier. For years this house had been a fortress. Then it became a battlefield. Now it was just mine again. Dora caught me standing there and asked, Are you okay, Mr. Whitaker? I smiled faintly. For the first time in a long time, yes. Silence, when it's finally honest, can be healing. For the first time, silence didn't just hurt, it healed. Justice doesn't always wear a robe or swing a gavel. Sometimes it wears sunglasses, holds a newspaper, and unfolds quietly under the Florida sun. July 28th, 2023. I was at Café Boulud on Sunrise Avenue, sitting by the window with a black coffee. When I saw it, the headline stretched across the Palm Beach Daily News like a gift-wrapped box. Gold digger sips $60 million. Scheme crumbles in court. Underneath, a smaller subheader read, Local businessman wins airtight legal battle against wife SEP's trust grab. Brother facing fraud probe. The article was precise, unsensational, almost cold in its delivery, which made it hit even harder. Tiffany's name. Zach's name. The court's decision. The fraud notices. It was all there, laid out like an autopsy of greed. No embellishments, just facts, dates, filings. I watched as two older women at the next table leaned in, whispering as they scanned the article. One of them even turned the page around to show her friend, eyebrows arched. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The story was doing the work for me. Marianne texted me as I was finishing my coffee. Marianne, front page, told you justice has good PR. I typed back, me, quiet justice is the best kind. Tiffany didn't issue a public statement. She couldn't. Part of the settlement and fraud proceedings involved a strict NDA. August 3rd, she signed it in her attorney's office, hands folded tightly in her lap. Zach wasn't as lucky. The fraud charges advanced to a settlement hearing by late August. He paid heavy fines, lost his brokerage license, and vanished from Palm Beach society almost overnight. In a place like this, reputation isn't currency, it's oxygen. He ran out fast. Evan's path was slower but steadier. His counseling session started mid-August. Marianne connected him with a financial therapist she trusted. He needs to rebuild, not just financially, but emotionally, she said. For the first time, Evan didn't resist structure. He showed up. He listened. He worked. Meanwhile, I turned my attention back to what mattered most: legacy. August 21st, 2023. Patel and I met in his office for what would be our final major restructuring conversation. The leather chairs creaked softly as we reviewed the documents. I want it airtight, I told him. He tapped the folder. Then this is the way. The LLC gets transferred fully into the foundation. Control shifts, but legacy stays intact. It SEPs the ultimate shield. The foundation wasn't new. My late wife and I had created it years earlier in her name, but it had sat dormant, like a ship in harbor waiting for the right tide. That day we set it sailing. I signed the transfer documents at 2:43 p.m. Ocean Boulevard LLC, once the secret linchpin of my estate, now belonged to the Whitaker Family Foundation, a philanthropic entity with strict bylaws, designed to protect and serve causes we'd both believed in. That night I walked the property alone. The fountains along the driveway were lit, water catching the warm light and scattering it like stars. For months those fountains had been background noise. That night they sounded alive again. I paused at the edge of the lawn, looking back at the house. The same house that had once felt like a fortress, then a battleground, then a tomb. Now it felt like legacy. Marianne called later that evening. Congratulations, she said. Feels quiet, I admitted. Good, she replied. Justice isn't said always loud. Sometimes it's set up quiet signature in an empty office. After the call, I stood there for a long time. The sound of the fountains and cicadas blending into a kind of Florida symphony. Justice had been served in court. But this was legacy being sealed under the palms. Justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it sets a quiet signature in an empty office. Late summer in Palm Beach has a particular kind of dusk. The air turns warm and heavy, cicadas hum like 1,000 tiny violins, and the sky glows in deep oranges and violets, as if the day itself doesn't want to end. That's where this story finds me, standing barefoot on the back patio of my mansion, the jasmine in bloom, and the weight of 2.5 years finally sliding off my shoulders. It was August 31st, 2023, a Thursday. The house was quiet, the way I'd always wanted it to be. No late-night whispering in kitchens, no hidden envelopes, no realtor tours through the garden. Just the soft trickle of the fountain and the rustling of palm fronds in the evening breeze. I'd spent the morning at the foundation office finalizing some initial charitable disbursements, scholarships, environmental grants, things my late wife and I had talked about over coffee years ago when legacy was just a dream scribbled on napkins. Now it was real, the paperwork was signed, the funds were allocated, and the foundation had a pulse. When I returned home that afternoon, Dora had opened all the windows to let the air circulate. She'd put on some light jazz on the speakers. For the first time in years, the house didn't feel like a fortress or a stage. It felt like a home again. I poured myself a bourbon, neat, and stepped outside as the sun dipped lower. The breeze carried the scent of the sea inland, mingling with jasmine. It smelled like memory and possibility at once. My phone buzzed. A text from Evan. Evan, counseling went well today. We talked about Mom a lot. I get it now. Thank you for not giving up on me. For a long moment, I stared at that message. The boy who once mocked me at the dinner table, who sided with Tiffany and Zach out of anger and confusion, was finally beginning to understand. Me, proud of you. Keep going. I set the phone down and leaned against the railing, watching the last streaks of sunset dissolve into twilight. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from. People think revenge is about noise, grand gestures, explosions. But real revenge, the kind that sticks, is quiet. It's methodical. It's justice wearing calm like a tailored suit. I thought back to April 2021, that Sunday dinner. Evan's cruel little smirk. Tiffany's conflicted laugh. You married a broke fool. Those words had lit the fuse. But what followed wasn't an explosion. It was a slow, deliberate burn that reshaped everything. My family, my estate, my sense of control. There were moments when I nearly broke. Nights when I stared at trust papers under the lamplight, wondering if the cost of vigilance was too high. Mornings when Evan's bitterness cut deeper than he realized. Afternoons when Tiffany's charm almost convinced me to look away. But I didn't set. I'd spent decades building this legacy. Not for her, not for Zach, not even entirely for Evan, but for something bigger, the promise I'd made to my wife that what we built together wouldn't be squandered by greed. The mansion stood behind me, its windows glowing softly in the dusk. For the first time, I didn't see it as a fortress. I saw it as a story, a long, complicated story with chapters of love, loss, betrayal, and justice. I smiled, not out of gloating, but out of relief. You didn't lose me? I murmured into the warm night air. You gave me away. It wasn't this dead anger anymore. It was clarity. I raised my glass toward the fountains, to the memory of my wife, to the sun finding his way back, to the foundation that would outlive me. Legacy is quiet. Money is loud. Love is the only thing that leaves an echo. The cicadas swelled louder as night fully settled in. The breeze cooled just enough to lift the edge of my shirt. Somewhere inside, Dora was closing the last window for the night. And me? I finally let the silence hold me, not as a threat, but as a comfort. The weight had lifted. Legacy is quiet. Money is loud. Love is the only thing that leaves an echo.